So we are complete now. We'll conduct this session, ladies and gentlemen, in English, because some of the panelists prefer to speak in English or only speak English. So I think translation is available. We are challenged, of course, by the previous session on neuroscience, but we will try our best to make it as interesting as possible, our session. So our session is about the fifth industrial revolution and the SDGs, as you know. We mainly at the United Nations like to measure any process, any progress with the SDGs. As you know, the SDGs are the blueprint for people, humanity, for planet, for the future, and for the present. And everything is measured by its contribution to the achievement of the SDGs. So when we talk, for example, about economic growth could be good, but it could serve SDGs, or could be only economic growth to benefit a certain segment of the society. So SDGs are goals and targets that are important for everyone. And we know the principle of the SDGs, leaving no one behind. So with that very brief introduction, because if we want to speak about SDGs, we need another couple of sessions. I'd like to present our distinguished panel. We have with us Dr. Dina Assaf, who is the UN Resident Coordinator to the United Arab Emirates. We have Dr. Fadi Salim, who is the Director of Policy Research Department at Mohammed bin Rashid School of Government. And we have Dr. Kathy Garner, who is the Director of Knowledge Economy Innovations. So welcome to our panelists. And I'd like to start with Dr. Dina. Dr. Dina, with all what is going on in the world in terms of crisis, COVID, fuel crisis, financial crisis, health crisis, armed conflicts that we are witnessing. Are the SDGs, my question is, are the SDGs still relevant? Are they still achievable? Or what do you think?
Thank you very much, Khaled. First of all, happy to be here to discuss this very important topic. And as you rightly indicated, Khaled, we are in a volatile world right now, and things are unstable. And it may make someone think, frameworks like the SDGs, are they relevant? And my answer would be that they're more relevant than ever. We know that the Sustainable Development Goals were created to help the world find the way forward in a unified manner around key areas of progress. When we find ourselves in a time of volatility, we need the stability of a framework that can help us move forward. So therefore, the SDGs continue to be relevant and actually will help us to get out of hopefully most, if not all, of the challenges that we face. You asked me if I felt they were achievable. We have to also be realistic. Some countries will be able to achieve the SDGs, We do know that from COVID-19, for example, there was a regression on many indicators for different countries that took us backward, and we're catching up now. And of course, countries who are going through different forms of conflict may find it difficult to achieve all the SDGs. However, this doesn't mean that we shouldn't make progress towards achieving them as much as we can. So again, just to repeat, for all countries in the world, having a target where we're all working together towards common objectives makes things stronger and gives us an ability to help one another to achieve these goals. I hope that helps start the conversation.
Thanks, Dr. Assaf. My next question is for Dr. Salim. Do you think our region is ready for the fifth industrial revolution? And where do we stand in terms of digitization, artificial intelligence, data adoption?
Thank you. So that's the question that is probably, to answer, we need a couple of ground setting points. First is the SDG. So the fifth industrial revolution, what differentiates it as per whatever definition you would like to use from the fourth industrial revolution is it's not just reliant on the advancements of technologies and information and data and the IoT, et cetera, but also it includes the human element, the sustainable development element, the inclusion, the societal well-being, et cetera. So the SDGs as a framework, as Dr. Dima has highlighted, is an important first step. And then we can talk about where do we stand in this region in terms of SDGs achievement. And in the School of Government, in the Mohammed Raj School of Government where I work, we develop and do research and data related to both digitization in our region by governments and by societies, as well as SDGs and sustainable development adoption or achievement in the region. So we track for each country the level of achievement. And unfortunately, as a region overall, as His Excellency Dr. Dardari in the morning highlighted that we have a long way to go in the region. And this data that we have identifies certain gaps, specifically in related to gender equality, climate action, undersea, etc. A long set of, unfortunately, a long set of sustainable development goals that the region has yet to achieve or to progress towards achieving it in the next 6 years or so. So that's the first step in terms of understanding if we're ready for one pillar of the fifth industrial revolution. The second pillar is the level of digitization and datafication of society and the readiness by societies and governments, and definitely private sector included, in terms of achieving a level of digitization that enables us to develop the foundation for adopting the fourth industrial revolution elements, including level of adoption of data availability, data quality, adoption of artificial intelligence, and even at a certain foundational level in many countries in the region, we have the issue of connectivity. We have the issue of basic infrastructure. That is a basic requirement for us to be able to talk about a fifth industrial revolution. Add to that, we have a skill gap, we have a knowledge gap, we are in the Knowledge Summit, and we have talent deficit in many of the fields that are related to achieving these goals. So some of the countries, if we can differentiate the countries in the region depending on their level of maturity in digital transformation, for example, some countries have achieved many of the foundational building blocks of having their society connected, their data frameworks are available, the policy and strategies in place by governments to enable them to take advantage of this. They have infrastructure for inclusion of the private sector, There's sustainable development efforts that are set in place with certain organizational structures and champions. But in other countries, they haven't yet achieved the level of basic digitization. So they are, and that affects the acceleration of achieving many of these the SDGs effectively. So we are in a very diverse region where some countries are highly advanced in achieving some of the SDGs, and they are highly advanced in achieving digital transformation and the policy frameworks to enable them to take advantage of the fifth industrial revolution, while the other group of countries are yet to be able to capture even the primary level of the fourth industrial revolution.
Yeah, but thank you for your answer. It's clear. But if we are talking about the Arab region, what percentage of the countries are ready? And
yeah.
so what is the gap?
So the gap is huge. Let's put it this way. In first level of, let's talk about examples. So some countries are yet struggling in terms of electricity connectivity, not even internet connectivity. So a much more basic level. And they are struggling in terms of inclusion of different demographics in society and education, like women, for example. And they're struggling in terms of even having the level of awareness of addressing climate action. While other group of countries, so I'm not going to talk percentages, so Dr. Dardari mentioned how poverty has increased in the region. While we see from our data, for example, that some countries in the region have already achieved SDG 1 related to poverty, while others are still struggling. But the poverty overall as a regional population has increased. So the more populous countries may have went back due to COVID and other regional conflicts, etc. But some countries that are specifically in terms of those that are able to diversify their economy, build capacity among their population, set the policy frameworks and the strategies in place, and have the stability to be able to capture and build on those countries, and primarily those countries are, some of them are in the Gulf region. Because of that, these indicators align with that, have been able to move and progress in many of these elements, while the rest of the region, unfortunately, most of it, are still struggling in one pillar or the other, achieving some of the SDGs or the digitization elements.
Thank you. Dr. Garner, what, in your opinion, are the implications of the fifth industrial revolution for change? And what is the importance of cities in achieving the fifth industrial revolution and the SDGs too?
Thank you. Well, first of all, I'd like to say that I'm actually pleased to see discussions around the fifth industrial revolution, because throughout my time in working in cities and elsewhere, I think sometimes all we hear about is the value of finance. And the fifth industrial revolution shifts that narrative and hopefully shifts the action from that sole economic, financial value to a societal value, and from welfare to well-being. The experience, I think, of the pandemic has really heightened the awareness of issues of balancing any economies, and I understand that this is hugely variable, and I'm speaking from a developed country, UK basis, balanced economies to a wider human and planetary well-being. I think it gives a much more balanced view of valuing and values. And the whole issue of capital is no longer about just financial capital, but human capital and natural capital. And this morning I had very inspiring discussion regarding traditional knowledge and knowledge capital, And I think these different capitals show a real sense of thinking. And I think I'd like to give you 2 examples, if that's okay.
Sure.
2 examples where I think this shift of thinking really came to my notice. First of all, some of you may know someone called Mark Carney. He was head of the Bank of England, and he gave some lectures to the BBC back in 2021. And he noted very much that values of society, people, had really become totally dominated by monetary value. And he demonstrated this by asking the question, we value Amazon, the company, at billions of dollars. How come we cannot value the Amazon rainforest until it is cut down, logged, or turned into farmland? This was a fundamental question for me. Why can't we value that which is the lungs of the planet? So I just felt that that really demonstrated how we were in a state of imbalance in relation to our value system. But change can take a long time. And I'm very thrilled by another initiative that has happened in the UK. The Office of National Statistics publishes something, GDP, gross product development. Everyone has heard, I expect, of GDP. Well, GDP estimates, it's taken a long time to realize that GDP is not a very effective measure for society. Back in 1968, Robert Kennedy made a statement which says that GDP measures everything but those things that make life worthwhile. And now the Office of National Statistics in the UK has decided to publish, alongside its publication of quarterly results of GDP, it is also publishing issues of well-being in the UK. And I think this is a real shift in it. So, Industrial Revolution 5.0, for me, is very welcome, and I see some weak signals and hopeful signs that we may actually be adopting this. But the focus, again, is largely on economics and industry. And a quote from Forbes magazine came to mind in this, where they said that never before have we seen such radical emphasis on repurposing the core objectives of industry and the economy. Now, I think perhaps in the past we have seen it, but we've been living in this situation for a very long time. But this is a big shift and a big challenge. And measures like the SDGs are really important to be able to tell us how we're progressing, how we're making steps forward on people, planet, and prosperity. And for me, SDG 11, for sustainable cities, is one of the most important ones, given that in 2030, something like 60% of the world's population are deemed to be living in urban areas. And by 2050, this might be as high as 70%. So an awful lot of people are going to be affected in terms of living in that urban area. But not just SDG 11, SDG 1 you've mentioned, SDG 13 for climate change. They are such valuable measures that I think we do need to really push forward. Unfortunately, SDG 11 is the only SDG that is actually taken down to a level below the nation. And it is it can be at an urban area. So the new urban agenda actually addresses this for cities. And I think that the change is already being seen in a number of cities. but maybe I'll come back to this in relation to knowledge cities, because this is a really important area, I feel, for progress on the Industrial Revolution 5.0. Have I done enough time, or would you like some more comments?
Up to you. We have.
I had prepared a 10-minute slide, so I'm going to talk probably too much. But I do feel that the Industrial Revolution 4.0 that we know that you've spoken about, actually Klaus Schwab, who was the originator of this concept, actually highlighted at the time that there were real risks in this, in creating increased divisions in society, and quoted the example of the United States, where basically the blue-collar workers were threatened, and the step into middle income actually dissolved, causing a social polarization and perhaps the rise of populism. So Industrial Revolution 5.0, we need to be, and listening to the AI presentations here today, we need to be very aware that it comes with real positives, but it may also come with real challenges. And I just want to mention that cities tend to be, given they've come through this industrial transformation from mass production, industrialization, all of that, they've lived through so many transitions and into a knowledge-based economy, they still have challenges. There are still huge inequities in the cities. There are still huge issues of pollution and the environment. But networks of cities around the world are coming together to really drive that change. And for example, the C40 cities network, 3/4 of the cities are decreasing their per capita emissions faster than their national figures. So they're making progress. Anyone who's been looking at the UK and London recently will know that the ultra-low emission zone has caused quite a stir in London, but it is also demonstrating that we are addressing the issue of pollution and problems. But for me, cities are actually the cradles of innovation. They have been for a very long time. And they are able to lead change because they have opportunities for change and they have self-governance. Undoubtedly, AI can play a major part in some of the technical challenges in cities, but I won't go into that. But I think we could push forward on Industrial Revolution 5.0 to perhaps get to the stage where we're talking, as Kandarian in Japan talks about, Society 5.0. And I hope that we will see not only the rhetoric around this initiative, but some real action flowing. And those cities that have already done this transition from industrialization to knowledge can be the places where innovation can thrive and new ideas can be tested and driven. And I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Thank you so much. We'll go back to Dr. Assaf. Tell us, please, more about the role of the UN as a catalyst for achieving the Sustainable Development Goals worldwide.
Thank you, Khalid. I think it's important to remind everyone that the United Nations, as we currently are in the world, is the only organization that provides normative standards for the world. So without the United Nations, we wouldn't have a forum to bring the world together to collaborate. Next year, we'll be holding the Summit of the Future. And within the Summit of the Future, for example, the United Nations will be working on, with all countries of the world, on setting normative standards for artificial intelligence and how do we cooperate and collaborate in artificial intelligence in a safe manner. So this is an example, as we were hearing this morning, the importance of technology, and the session that was talking about the future, that kind of was like, okay, I don't know how that's going to be, but was all about artificial intelligence. This gives one example of how the UN stays on the cutting edge of what is happening in the world and finding ways to make it easier for us to collaborate and cooperate. Additionally, of course, the United Nations is made up of many different entities. It's not just one entity. And each of these organizations holds its normative mandate in the areas of specialization that it is working on, and helps to facilitate and to bring to the forefront to countries on how to achieve their SDGs and how to address the challenges that they're facing. So the UN has an important role in many ways in facilitating, supporting collaboration, reminding us of our values and norms, and ensuring that we are also keeping track of where we are and where we're going. So many different roles, Khalid.
Thank you, thank you. Dr. Fadi Salim, given the challenges we are facing in both digital transformation and SDG implementation, what are the policy options or policy directions that would help this region to embrace the fifth industrial revolution?
I think it's important. This is the question that, I mean, as somebody doing research in public policy and as a school of government, this is the question that we keep getting from regional leaders and policymakers. And this is definitely where our research has been trying to fill these gaps. So to highlight some, because the list goes on, and I think, how many hours do you have for this answer? But let me try to highlight some of these. First of all, if you are to look at the both pillars of the fifth industrial revolution, or the multiple pillars that it has, both on digitization, adoption, human inclusion, well-being, sustainable development, et cetera, then you need to first, for this region, you need to get your data together, in the sense that you need to have data availability policies and strategies and frameworks and organizations that provide, gather, provide, make available, and utilize data. This is a challenge and a gap that our region has. And it's an important challenge specifically for the fifth industrial revolution, as the definitions we have in place today, where artificial intelligence plays a major role, and artificial intelligence without proper representative data, as well as algorithms and systems in place that guarantee ethical applications of utilization of these data sets, then we have a challenge of, even if we have adoption, but faulty or false data, then you create biased interventions and biased algorithms if the artificial intelligence applications are to be involved in daily lives of humans. So data availability, data quality, and data representativeness is a critical, primary, foundational element where policymakers require that they need to build capacity in this area, they need to build institutions, they need to build also setups and organizations that manage this across society and within the government. This is something that some countries in the region have managed. So they have organizations, entities, government entities, dedicated to data governance, data management, data production, quality data frameworks put in place, etc. The second critical policy option or direction, if you like, is building capacity and developing talent. So our region also suffers in terms of having proper and feasible level of capacity in different areas. whether it's within the public sector, that from leadership to the public administrators that manage achieving or developing the different responses to many SDGs, for example, but also at a more basic level. From our educational system may not be equipped yet in many countries in the region for the needs that we need to, for the current directions that the fifth industrial revolutions are driving us towards. So capacity building is also another policy intervention area that is required across the board, and it requires investment heavily and requires systems and policy frameworks. The third dimension is if we look at the current state of the SDGs, looking at the dashboard that we have based on our data for the 22 countries in the region for the 17 goals, then the reddest SDG in terms of the least achieved SDG for us is women empowerment and inclusion. So we have some of the worst in terms of globally in terms of achieving that related SDG. So including that half of society is an important, critical also element and direction for policymakers if we are to first build capacity in the areas that we need, so ensure that nobody left behind, but also developing adoption by that part of society, the critical demographic in society that need to adopt digital transformation as well. So we have digital divide or a digital canyon in some countries in terms of women adoption of technology. So that creates this bias by the algorithms and artificial intelligence applications when data is, especially in the age of large language models and generative AI, where data is generated by just part of the society, not the whole. The other element, and I mean, I can stop after this because of time, but I can keep going on, is given, especially among countries that are currently at the forefront in our region, at the forefront of adoption and digitization. There is a critical need today, given if we are to benefit from and manage and govern the transformation towards the fifth industrial revolution, we need ethical frameworks to manage these transformations. And it could be at the starting point, could be the principles that need to be put in place, whether for how to manage data and how to govern data, as well as how to govern the application and implications of artificial intelligence across society once it's disseminated and adopted by large parts of society. So how do you deal with harm? How do you deal with bias? How do you deal with accountability? How do you deal with IP? Many questions that require, each would require a lot of research and a lot of grounded field work for each country, because some would be different than others based on their demographics, based on their cultural settings, based on their governance structures, et cetera, et cetera. So this is another critical policy intervention area for the fifth industrial revolution, which is a foundation for us to not leave anyone behind and not to create victims of the fifth industrial revolutions in our region.
Thank you. Thank you. Dr. Garner, do you think that the fifth industrial revolution requires new goals to be achieved within the new cities? And how can we ensure that we are prepared for that?
Well, I'd just like to build on the previous speaker, because I think one of the big challenges is that places differ by context, and the SDGs, while they've taken a global perspective, it is vital that we're able to look at the variation in different areas and different cities, and to be able to address people being left behind in certain countries. I'm interested on your SDG with women here, because that will be very different in, say, the US or in the UK. And I think context becomes really, really vital. The SDG 11, I believe, and I may be wrong, I'm sure somebody can correct me, is the only one that's been devolved to a lower level than national, because under the new urban agenda, cities can look specifically at those SDGs. So for me, I think the SDGs have got it right, but we need to prioritize in relation to the context in which people are living and the places in which they are looking to push these forward. The big challenge for cities, of course, is that they do not have all the powerful levers to change. So if we decided that in relation to the model of current economics, which is very focused on what you would term neoliberal capitalism, if we wish to move away from a Haykian economics to a more Keynesian approach and being able to value those values that I mentioned in my first presentation as much as those values which are pounds, dollars, and dirhams, then cities don't have the privilege to do that. They don't have the subsidiarity to do that change. So we have to get an alignment globally, nationally, and locally. And I believe that cities around local have a lot of potential advantages in that they can reach right down into communities and make a difference. But for me, the SDGs have got the right topics, but we have to prioritize them differently in different contexts. And that's where I would push that. The challenge, of course, always is to learn from others and to share knowledge. And one of the things that really struck me in the AI presentation earlier this morning, I've been looking at this context issue for preparedness for climate crisis. And it's very different if you live on a coastal city, or you live in a desert city, or you live in a completely different place. But I've been using a modeling process called object-oriented modeling. Very complicated, but it draws out the similar issues and allows people to contrast and compare their preparations on things. But in the AI session this morning, we heard about digital twins. And this is a fascinating project to be able to look at creating your context in a digital space and being able to monitor changes in that space without actually having to do it on the ground. I know I keep saying context is everything. So if we have a rapidly growing city from informal migration, the challenges faced there will be rather different from some of the shrinking cities in the global north, where actually populations are declining. People are moving out, and subject to the pandemic, there's been a lot of greening and 15-minute cities and a lot of change in cities. So it's important to have those indicators as the underlying context. But as the actual local context changes, we need to be mindful of those comparisons for the future and the success of Industrial Revolution 5.0. I'll leave it at that. I could come back to a bit more about climate change if anyone is interested.
Thank you so much, Dr. Garner. Ladies and gentlemen, we have few minutes left in case anybody from the audience has a question or a comment or an intervention, so the floor is open in case anybody wants to ask, contribute. No, seems it's not the case, so let me at the end thank our distinguished panelists, Dr. Garner, Dr. Salim, and Dr. Assaf for their contribution. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for attending this session, and wishing you a good afternoon and a great evening. Thank you.